Hey guys, my name is Kevin, and I'm here to present my first walkthrough on how I created this old school Pepsi animation. I used After Effects and Cinema 4D for the particles. The programs and plugins for this are all listed here. I used After Effects, Photoshop, and Cinema 4D. The programs you must have are 3D Stroke and X Particles. For this tutorial specifically, autofill, motion 2, and cycles are optional. If you want to follow along, then you just have to worry about X Particles, 3D Stroke. Everything else, the other plugins are not necessary. Cool. So let's begin. I'm going to start off with creating an X Particles system, just so I have everything organized in those group settings that they have. And I'm going to switch the emission type to sphere. Right now they're all emitting away from the sphere. I just want it to be static, and I want it to be a one shot. It's where it just makes the particles and then it stops. So I will switch the speed to 0. As you see, the particles don't move, they just start coming in. Right now the emission mode is at rate. I will switch that to shot, which means it'll just make it in the first frame and then stop emitting after the first frame. Let's raise up the particle count. Let's use 15,000. Now you see I have 15,000 particles there. So the goal here is to create the Coke particle look. We're going to use turbulence to shape it into that liquidy, the kind of like a splash of Coke. This is cool. I'm going to switch the viewing mode to circles just so I could see the radius of each particle. Right now I'm adjusting the turbulence effect so it could slowly morph into that look. I'm just going to play around with these settings until I get the right turbulence look. That's looking pretty good. Cool. Maybe keyframe a couple of these so I can kind of slow down the strength of it a little bit. Cool. I think this is cool. Now I'm going to add XP fluid effects to give it more, to make the simulation more fluid-like. So now when the turbulence takes effect, the distortion of the particles are going to be more fluid-like instead of just being just regular particles that kind of just separate evenly. Now I'm going to cache the particle system before I throw in a mesher. It's good to cache it when you're using a high number of particles, just so it's easy to see when you're scrubbing through the timeline, and also it saves render time when you cache it. Cool. So now I have that cached through frame 1 through 120, and now I will add a generator, which is there. OVD mesher. OVD mesher is generator of choice. Drag emitter into sources, and as you can see right now, the voxel size and the point radius is too high. It looks kind of like clay, or it looks like a bunch of balls that are kind of mushed together. So I'm gonna lower the voxel size, which is the kind of like the pixel density. That's not a good explanation. Kind of like the density of the detail. So the lower the voxel size, the more detail you'll be having. Now I'm adding more filters, which is kind of like a blur, kind of blurring the mesher together, so it looks more like a fluid instead of kind of just like a bunch of spheres that are put together. It's looking pretty good. I kind of like that. I just gotta choose a camera angle. So I'm gonna finesse this a little bit more to get the right look, but it's looking like, I mean, I'm closer to what I want. I have like little particle splashes of Coke and some main clusters of Coke that it looks like a liquid. Okay, so in the render settings, I'm going to make this 1024 by 1024, switch the render to Cycles 4D, and make sure my graphic cards are selected in the checkbox. Cool. Raise the samples up to 8. I'll lower the ray bounces a bit. Lower it to let's say 4. I don't need too many light bounces because this is not an environment. I didn't make any environment. This is just a single particle simulation. There's not a lot of light bouncing, so I don't want to spend computing power on too many light bounces. Switching the focal length to 60s just so it's like a flatter, more of a flatter focal length, like look for it to it. Cool. So now it's time to make the material for the cola. I'm going to use the principled BSDF shader, which is kind of like a universal shader in Cycles that that you can have on. You can create almost any material using this simple shader. Right now it's white, but I'm going to give it more of a subsurface and transparency in order for it to look more like cola. In the Cycles environment, I do have the Grayscale Gorilla HDR eyes that I purchased before. I set them up so they're easily accessible through the Cycles environment node. That is what I'll be using for lighting the scene. I won't be using any physical lights, just an HDR eye. So I'm going to speed through this. This is more of trial and error on like sliders on how to get it look right. Looks like I'm getting somewhere with this. Just doing some render tests. Seeing if I should increase the number of samples. Cool, this is looking good. So I'm just going to adjust the index of refraction a bit, and so it's closer to water's index of refraction, and mess with the transparency and see if I can get it. See what it looks like with maybe being slightly more transparent. Hopefully it's not too reflective or too bright. Okay, that's a little It's a little too much. What happens if I push it? Yeah, I don't know if this is the look I'm looking for. Go set it back down. Cool. So I think that's a good. That looks good. I'm going to set up the render samples a little higher and turn on the denoising checkbox and set the surrender and throw it in After Effects. This is the end of part 1. In part 2, I will continue, and I think I will finish it up in part 2, where I will go through After Effects process on how I composited this and how I animated the Pepsi logo. Thank you for watching. Please click the like button and subscribe if you want to see more.